I opened the door to my husband's company party with a gift in hand, only to see him on one knee proposing to his new CO, my own stepsister. "Will you leave my poor, frigid wife and marry me?" he asked. Everyone laughed. Then my stepsister said yes. So I walked away. Quietly cancelled every payment, party, and trip, and pulled out my 90% company share, worth $357 million. Minutes later, my phone lit up with 156 missed calls. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Go ahead and get comfortable, maybe pour yourself a cup of tea. I have a feeling this is going to be a long conversation. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you just know something's wrong? It's not something you can see or touch. It's in the air. A static charge that makes the little hairs on your arms stand up. Like the dead quiet before a tornado rips through town, or that sixth sense your grandma always swore by. That's exactly what hit me, like a physical force, the second my heels clicked against the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Ballroom. Before I even left the apartment that evening, something felt off. I stood in front of the mirror in my walk-in closet, a space Sterling had insisted on, filled with clothes I rarely wore. I'd chosen a simple, elegant navy blue suit. Powerful, but understated. That was me. I was the foundation, the steel beams hidden behind the pretty facade. I put on the diamond earrings Sterling had given me for our 5th anniversary. I remember that night. He'd made a big show of it at a fancy restaurant, telling me I was the bedrock of his success. I touched one of the cold diamonds, a strange sense of irony washing over me. Bedrock can be shattered, after all. The drive over was quiet. The city lights blurred past the window of the Uber, a river of gold and white. I should have been excited. This was the annual gala for Clarigen Technologies. My company. The one I'd started in a cramped, dusty office with second-hand furniture and a dream fueled by lukewarm coffee and a small inheritance from my grandmother. Of course, to the world, it was Sterling's company. He was the handsome, charismatic frontman. I was the reclusive genius, the coder who preferred the clean logic of algorithms to the messy politics of the boardroom. It was a role I had accepted, even embraced, for years. For him. For us. When I arrived, the place was dripping with money. It was almost vulgar. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, scattering prismatic light everywhere. The floors were so polished you could see the tired lines around your own eyes in their reflection. This was the obscene luxury Sterling loved, the kind that screams "we have more money than sense" in about 14 different languages. All of it paid for by the silent, tireless work of the code I had written. I was clutching a small, elegantly wrapped gift box. It felt ridiculously small in the vastness of the room. Inside was a vintage 1958 Patek Philippe watch. A classic. Understated, brilliant, a masterpiece of engineering. It was everything I admired. Sterling had mentioned it in passing months ago, pointing it out in some glossy magazine while we were waiting for a flight. He'd forgotten about it the next day, but I didn't. That's what good wives do, isn't it? We listen. We remember the little things. We move heaven and earth to make them happen. The price tag was, well, let's just say it could have funded a promising startup for a year. It was a drop in the bucket for Clarigen, but a significant symbol for me. A testament to a partnership I still, foolishly, believed in. As I moved through the crowd, that strange feeling intensified. The air was thick with unspoken words. Conversations would stutter and die when I approached, only to flare up again in hushed, excited whispers the moment I passed. People I'd known for years, board members' wives I'd had lunch with, would give me a quick, tight smile, their eyes darting away. Their faces were filled with something I couldn't quite place at first. Then it hit me. It was pity. Pity. It's a terrible, corrosive thing to see on the faces of your peers. It makes you feel small and exposed. Then, the laughter started. It wasn't the polite, tinkling sound of champagne-fueled amusement. No, this was a raw, ugly, guttural sound. The kind of laughter that comes from the belly, the kind that feeds on someone else's pain. It was the sound a mob makes. It was the sound of my life imploding, and everyone in that room had a front row seat. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I followed the sound, drawn toward it like a moth to a destructive flame. It led me to a small stage at the front of the ballroom, set up for the evening's speeches. And that's when I saw him. My husband of 7 years, Sterling. Looking every bit the dashing CEO, the man of the hour. He was down on one knee. My first thought, a fleeting, nonsensical flash of denial, was that he was tying his shoe. Or perhaps he'd dropped a cufflink. But he wasn't looking at the floor. He was holding a microphone in one hand and a small, velvet box in the other. The box was open, revealing a diamond ring so large it looked like a shard of ice. And he was looking up, with an expression of adoration I hadn't seen on his face in years, at the company's new CEO. A woman I knew all too well. A woman who had haunted the edges of my life for 2 decades. My own stepsister, Delia. She'd slithered into my life when I was 16, after my father remarried her mother. Delia was all sharp angles and a predatory smile, with a talent for finding your biggest insecurity and pressing on it until you broke. From day one, she had made it her mission to take everything that was mine, my father's attention, my friends, my small teenage triumphs. It seemed she was finally making her grandest play of all. Sterling's voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system I had personally approved the budget for, boomed across the ballroom. Each word was a perfectly crafted dagger, honed over months of secret meetings and whispered promises, aimed right at my heart. "Delia," he said, his voice thick with a fake, theatrical emotion that made my skin crawl. "Will you marry me?" He paused, a master showman milking the moment, letting the crowd hang on his next words as he turned his head slightly, just enough to make sure I could see the cruel smirk playing on his lips. "I'm ready to leave my poor, ugly wife for you right now." The room erupted. The laughter was a physical blow, a concussive force that knocked the air from my lungs and sent a roaring sound through my ears. It was a tidal wave of humiliation, and I was drowning in it, suffocating under the weight of hundreds of mocking eyes. I could see the phones, a sea of them, held up high, their small red recording lights blinking like malevolent fireflies, capturing my public execution for eternity. My stepsister, Delia, looked down at my husband. Her smile was the most terrible thing I had ever seen. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph, the same smile I'd seen when she convinced my father I was the one who had broken our mother's favorite vase. She leaned into the microphone he held up for her, her voice as smooth and sweet as poison. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing out clear as a bell. "Yes, I will." The roar that followed was deafening. Cheers, whistles, thunderous applause. They were on their feet, celebrating as if they had just witnessed a royal wedding instead of the systematic, brutal destruction of my life. Sterling slid the ring onto her finger, stood up, and pulled her into a deep, dramatic kiss worthy of a Hollywood movie. Someone near me actually hooped. I just stood there, frozen, still holding that stupid, expensive watch in its stupid, perfect wrapping. Watching my husband kiss my stepsister while hundreds of people who had eaten at my table and smiled to my face, celebrated. The watch in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, a dead weight, a symbol of a love that had never been real. The smart play, the one everyone in that room was hoping for, was to scream. To run up there and claw at Delia's perfectly smug face. To throw the gift box, to cause a scene so epic it would be talked about for years. To give them the entertainment they felt they were owed. Nothing entertains the wealthy quite like watching someone else lose their carefully constructed dignity in public. But here's the thing you learn after spending 15 years staring into the cold, binary heart of a computer, building complex systems from nothing but logic and will. You learn to detach. You learn that emotion is a liability. You learn to play the long game. You learn that the best revenge isn't a hot, messy, emotional outburst. It's a cold, methodical, systematic dismantling. It's a beautifully written algorithm of destruction. So, instead of giving them the meltdown they craved, the dramatic confrontation they were all secretly recording, I did something that confused the hell out of every single person in that room. I turned around. No shouting. No tears. No dramatic declarations. I just pivoted on my heel, my back straight, my chin up, as if I were leaving a particularly boring board meeting that had run on too long. The gift box stayed firmly in my hands. Damned if I was going to leave a small fortune's worth of Swiss craftsmanship and my own good taste behind for these vultures. The energy in the room shifted as I moved. It was palpable. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd like a wave. This wasn't in the script. Where was the rage? The hysterics? The public breakdown that would give them something juicy to gossip about over brunch for the next 6 months? I kept walking, my steps steady and measured on the cold marble. I passed the champagne fountain, a monument to excess that probably cost more than my first year of college. I passed the ice sculpture of the Clarigen logo, a perfect, gleaming testament to my life's work, already starting to melt under the heat of 1,000 tiny betrayals. The string quartet had stopped playing, their bows hovering over their instruments as they watched the real drama unfold. The doorman, a new guy I didn't recognize, probably hired special for the event, opened the massive brass doors for me. His face was a mask of professional confusion. I gave him a slight, courteous nod. I stepped out into the cool Manhattan night, and the honest, chaotic symphony of the city, the blaring horns, the distant sirens, the murmur of a million lives, felt more real and comforting than the manufactured drama I had just escaped. My Uber was already there, a black sedan idling quietly at the curb. I'd called it the moment I heard Sterling's voice on that microphone. The moment I understood. I may be a lot of things, a fool, a cuckold, a woman publicly scorned, but stupid isn't one of them. I slid into the back seat, the leather cool against my skin. The driver, a man in his 50s with kind eyes, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. He took in my formal suit, the silver gift box I was clutching like a life raft. "Rough night?" he asked, his voice gentle. It's a funny thing, the kindness of strangers. Sometimes it's the only kindness you get. I looked out the window at the glittering facade of the Grand Meridian, where the party was already kicking back into high gear, the silhouettes of the happy revelers dancing behind the glass. I thought about Sterling and Delia, toasting their new life with my champagne. "No," I said, and a strange, cold smile touched my own lips. I meant it with every fiber of my being. It's getting better by the minute. They thought they'd won. They thought they had taken everything. The poor, stupid bastards had no idea what was coming for them. The real party was just getting started. My penthouse felt different when I walked in. Physically, of course, everything was the same. The ridiculously expensive, uncomfortable white sofa Sterling had insisted on. The pretentious, abstract art pieces that cost more than a teacher's annual salary. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a billion-dollar view of a city that had just witnessed my utter humiliation. But the energy, the very air in the rooms, had shifted. It felt lighter. As if a pressure valve that had been slowly tightening for years had finally been released. The suffocating pretense was gone. I walked into the kitchen and tossed the gift box onto the gleaming marble island. It landed with a satisfying, definitive thud next to a bowl of organic figs that probably cost $50. Our life, no, I had to stop thinking that way, my life had become a performance piece, an Instagram-worthy tableau of success that was utterly hollow. I went straight to the bar. I bypassed the champagne, the vodkas, the gins. I reached for the bottle of Macallan 25-year-old. The good stuff. The bottle Sterling always patronizingly referred to as Rosalind's little hobby, as if my appreciation for a finely crafted single malt was some quaint little quirk, like collecting stamps. Tonight, it wasn't a hobby. It was medicine. It was fuel. I poured 3 fingers into a heavy crystal tumbler, no ice. The burn of the whiskey as it went down was sharp and clean. It felt honest, brutally so, in a way nothing else in my life had for months, maybe years. I had been lying to myself for so long about what my marriage had become that I'd forgotten what the unvarnished truth even tasted like. Turns out, it tastes like expensive scotch and the promise of righteous, ice-cold fury. My office was at the far end of the penthouse, my sanctuary. Sterling hated this room. It had no style, he said. It was filled with dark wood, comfortable leather chairs that were actually meant to be sat in, and shelves lined with actual books on quantum computing, algorithmic theory, and historical biographies, not just decorative spines chosen by an interior designer. And, most importantly, a biometric safe built into the wall, hidden behind a large, moody painting of the Brooklyn Bridge. My thumbprint granted me access. The heavy steel door swung open with a soft hiss. I reached inside and pulled out a black leather folder. It felt cool and solid in my hands. The label, printed from a label maker in my own neat, blocky handwriting, read, "Primary Assets." Sterling had laughed at me for keeping paper copies of everything important. "Who needs paper anymore, Rosie? Everything's on the cloud," he'd scoffed. The woman who designed and built the damn cloud architecture and knew all its vulnerabilities, that's who. The woman who understood that in a contentious divorce, lawyers and judges prefer a tangible paper trail. The woman who had watched her husband's business lunches with her own stepsister become more frequent and last far longer than any business required. She needs paper. I spread the contents across the wide expanse of my mahogany desk. Each document was a brick in the foundation of the empire I had built. The original incorporation papers for Clarigen Technologies, filed 7 years ago. My signature, bold and clear. Sterling's, a little too flamboyant. He owned 10% of the company. I owned 90%. I'd given him that 10% as a wedding gift, a gesture of partnership. A gesture that now seemed profoundly naive. Then there were the other papers. The 23 separate patent applications, each one representing thousands of hours of my life, thousands of lines of code, thousands of moments of frustration and breakthrough. All filed with my name, Rosalind Evans, as the primary inventor. These patents were the engine of the company. They were the secret sauce that generated 99% of Clarigen's revenue. They had funded our lifestyle, this penthouse, Sterling's fancy suits, and, I now realized with sickening clarity, Delia's recent promotion to CEO. And finally, the bank statements from the very beginning. The initial seed money for Clarigen, a wire transfer for $200,000. It had come directly from my personal savings account, the last of my grandmother's inheritance. The note in the will had been specific. "For your dreams, Rosalind," she had written. "Not for anyone else's. Build something that will last." Bless her wise, practical heart. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I opened the company's financial management system. I had designed it myself, from the ground up. It was my digital fortress, with backdoors and kill switches that only I knew existed. Sterling had never bothered to learn how to use it. "It's too complicated, honey," he'd always said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "That's what we pay our CFO for." The Chief Financial Officer. Janet Morrison. A sharp woman, but one who was loyal to the CEO. The CEO who signed her checks. But the system had rules. My rules. And any major financial decision, any transfer over $10,000, required my personal, encrypted authorization. For years, I had been the silent partner, happily clicking approve on vacation packages, designer shopping sprees, and mysterious consulting fees paid out to Delia, all disguised as legitimate business expenses. I had been a fool. But a fool with administrative access. The first kill was easy. A simple search for upcoming travel. There it was, Sterling Monroe, Delia Pierce. Destination, Street Barts. A business retreat scheduled for next week at a 5-star resort. I could almost picture them, lounging by the pool, sipping champagne, laughing about me. A few clicks. A single authorization code. And just like that, their tropical victory lap evaporated into thin air. The first-class flights, the oceanfront suite, the couple spa package that cost more than a used car, all of it, gone. An automated cancellation email was probably already on its way to Sterling's inbox. Next up, tonight's little humiliation spectacular. I pulled up the expense report. The Grand Meridian Ballroom rental. The catering bill, with its ludicrous charges for artisanal cheese and swan-shaped pastries. The florist. The string quartet. All charged to Clarigen's corporate events account. A networking opportunity, Sterling had called it. Oh, it was an opportunity, all right. Stop payment orders are a beautiful, beautiful thing when you know how to file them correctly. I drafted a single, cold, automated message, payment cancelled due to unauthorized use of corporate funds pending an internal audit. One by one, I sent it out. To the venue. To the caterer. To the ridiculously expensive photographer who had likely captured my moment of agony in stunning high definition. They were all about to discover that my husband's grand gestures were built on a foundation of lies and a credit line that had just been severed. But that was just trimming the hedges. The real target, the nuclear option, was sitting right there on my screen, glowing with quiet menace. The main operational account. $357 million. The lifeblood of the company. Managed by a series of executive overrides, all of which ultimately required my primary stakeholder authorization. Sterling thought he was the CEO. The board thought he was the CEO. Hell, half of Silicon Valley thought he was the CEO. But being the public face of a company and actually running it are two very different things. And the difference, my friends, is usually measured in who controls the money. I'd built multiple fail-safes into the system years ago. I'm a paranoid coder by nature. I always plan for the worst-case scenario. Every major decision, every significant transfer, required my digital signature using two-factor authentication tied to a physical key I kept in my safe. It was a bulletproof system, assuming both executives were operating in good faith. That assumption had been a catastrophic error in judgment. The system lockdown took exactly 30 seconds to implement. A dialog box popped up, one I had designed myself. It read, "Initiate emergency financial protocol Y/N?" I clicked yes. A second box appeared. This will freeze all outgoing expenditures and require primary stakeholder authorization for reversal. Confirm? My finger hovered over the mouse. This was it. The point of no return. I thought of Sterling's cruel words. I thought of Delia's triumphant smirk. I thought of the laughter. I clicked. Confirmed. And just like that, Clarigen Technologies was financially paralyzed. No transfers. No payments. No access to operational funds. The entire corporate machine ground to a screeching halt, silenced by a single, vengeful click. My phone, which I'd left on the desk, started buzzing almost immediately. It didn't stop. It lit up like a deranged Christmas tree, vibrating violently against the polished wood. Sterling's name flashed on the screen. Then Delia's. Then our CFO, Janet, her name appearing in a frantic red. Then numbers I didn't recognize but could probably guess were very angry, very confused board members whose portfolios were about to take a nosedive. I picked up the phone, looked at the chaos unfolding on its screen, and with a sense of profound calm, I powered it off. I poured another scotch. Outside, Manhattan glittered, oblivious. They had committed the perfect crime, they thought. They had stolen my life, my dignity, and my trust, all while making me pay for the privilege. But they'd made one crucial, fatal mistake. They forgot that in business, as in code, the person who builds the system is the only one who truly knows how to burn it all to the ground. And I was just getting started. I woke up at dawn, after maybe 3 hours of sleep, feeling more clear-headed and alive than I had in years. The morning light streaming through my floor-to-ceiling windows felt different. Cleaner. As if the city itself had been washed clean of last night's filth. I powered my phone back on. It was a digital apocalypse. 156 missed calls. 283 text messages. A small novel's worth of panicked, then angry, then pleading voicemails. I ignored them all and went to make coffee. Not the pretentious, single-origin, artisanal nonsense Sterling insisted on, but real coffee. The good, old-fashioned dark roast that could wake the dead and didn't require a dissertation to describe its flavor profile. The kitchen felt enormous and blessedly silent. No whirring blender making some green smoothie, no passive-aggressive notes about whose turn it was to buy the ridiculously expensive almond milk. Just me, my coffee, and the deeply satisfying silence of a life that was finally, truly, my own again. I was halfway through my first cup when the intercom buzzed, a jarring sound in the newfound peace. It was Patrick from the front desk. His voice was laced with the practiced neutrality of a man who has seen every kind of rich people drama imaginable. Morning, Ms. Evans. My apologies for the early call. There's a young man down here. Name is Leo Vargas. Says he works for your husband. He's pretty upset, ma'am. Leo. Sterling's executive assistant. A decent kid, smart, ambitious, fresh out of business school with a mountain of student loans. He'd simply hitched his wagon to the wrong star. I felt a pang of sympathy for him. He was just collateral damage in a war he didn't even know was being fought. Send him up, Patrick. Thanks. I had just enough time to throw on a silk robe before Leo burst through my front door. He looked like a hurricane of panic and cheap cologne. His normally immaculate hair was a mess, his tie was askew, and he was clutching a Starbucks cup with a white-knuckled grip, as if it were a life raft. Ms. Evans, thank God you're here, he babbled, the words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. There's been some kind of massive technical glitch, a cascading systems failure, I think. The accounts are all frozen, the international payroll for the London office is due in 2 hours and we can't process it, the investor meeting this morning was cancelled because the conference room booking didn't go through, and Sterling's corporate Amex was declined at Starbucks. At Starbucks, Ms. Evans. And he's completely freaking out because Delia's card was declined, too, and their Caribbean trip got cancelled, and he's been on the phone with the bank and they say it's an internal authorization issue and… Leo, I interrupted, holding up a hand. My voice was calm, a stark contrast to his hysteria. Breathe. He sucked in a shaky lungful of air, his eyes wide with the desperate hope of someone looking for a savior. Can you fix it? Sterling said it was probably just a server issue, something with the firewall you designed. He said you built all the systems, so you were the only one who could sort it out. Did Sterling send you here, Leo? I asked, my voice still gentle. He deflated a little, looking down at his shoes. Yes, ma'am. He said you'd want to know about the technical issues right away, to protect the company. Technical issues. That was rich. He still thought this was a bug in the system, not a feature working exactly as intended. He had spent so many years posing as the king that he'd forgotten who had actually built the castle and held all the keys. Leo, I said, my voice turning a little firmer. Were you at the party last night? His face went through about 6 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, dawning recognition, acute embarrassment, and finally, a sick, horrified understanding that made me feel genuinely sorry for him. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the marble floor. I see. I turned and walked over to my desk. I picked up a thick manila envelope I had prepared while he was on his way up. I need you to deliver this to Sterling. He has 24 hours to respond. No extensions. No negotiations. Tell him the clock started the moment you walked out this door. 24 hours. Leo took the envelope as if it were radioactive. What should I tell him about the accounts? The payroll? The meetings? Tell him the truth, I said, looking him straight in the eye, wanting him to understand the gravity of the message he was about to deliver. Tell him there are no technical glitches. Tell him the system is working perfectly, exactly as designed. Tell him that sometimes when you decide to burn a bridge, you discover you were standing on the wrong side of the river all along. He just blinked at me, the metaphor clearly flying over his caffeine-addled, sleep-deprived head. Ms. Evans, I don't understand what's going on. I sighed. He was a good kid. He deserved better than to be working for a snake like Sterling. Leo, how long have you worked for the company? 2 years, ma'am. And in those 2 years, how many major business decisions, how many contracts over $1 million have you seen Sterling sign without my final authorization? He thought about it, his brow furrowed in concentration. I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he started connecting dots that had been right there in front of him for 2 years. The way Sterling would always say, I need to run this by Rosalind. The way my digital signature was the final, necessary step on every major acquisition and partnership. I don't think I've ever seen him make a major decision without your final say-so, ma'am. That's because he can't, I said simply. Clarigen isn't his company, Leo. It never was. I founded it. I funded it. My patents are its lifeblood. He has been a spokesperson. A very well-compensated public face. But he has never, not for one single day, been in charge. I let that sink in. So when he decided to publicly humiliate me in front of our employees and business partners while asking another woman to marry him, yeah, that was a pretty clear signal that our business partnership was over. I gestured with the sealed envelope. This just makes it official. Leo's face was pale. What happens now? To the company? To everyone's jobs? My salary? That depends entirely on how Sterling responds to what's in that envelope, I said. I walked him to the door. But Leo, I waited until he met my eyes, and I gave him a small, sad smile. Whatever happens, it won't be a technical glitch. And you might want to start updating your resume. Just a friendly suggestion. After he left, the silence of the penthouse felt different. It was no longer just peaceful, it was charged with power. I sat down at my laptop. Not to work, but to reflect on what I had drafted in the early hours of the morning. Inside that envelope was not a negotiation. It was a surrender document. A masterpiece of strategic warfare disguised as a corporate restructuring, all vetted by my lawyer who had called it beautifully and brutally effective. It contained 7 points. 7 daggers. 1. Sterling Monroe resigns as Chief Executive Officer of Clarigen Technologies, effective immediately upon signature. No graceful transition period. No face-saving stepping down to pursue other opportunities. A clean, swift amputation. 2. Delia Pierce is permanently banned from any business involvement, consulting arrangements, or contractual relationships with Clarigen Technologies or any of its subsidiaries. Her little boardroom coup was over before it began. 3. I, Rosalind Evans, assume the roles of Chief Executive Officer and Financial Oversight Director, with unlimited veto power over any corporate expenditure exceeding $1,000. Every coffee, every lunch, every fraudulent business expense would now require my personal, line-item approval. 4. This was the one that would break him. Sterling Monroe agrees to repay the sum of $357 million to the company in structured installments over a period of 5 years. I'd spent all night doing the math, running audits on years of expense reports. It was every penny of corporate funds he'd wasted on their lavish lifestyle. Every spa treatment, every shopping spree, every first-class flight, every 5-star hotel. All of it, itemized and ready for collection. 5. Sterling will issue a public statement, to be drafted by me, within 72 hours of signing, acknowledging me as the founder, primary architect, and 90% majority stakeholder of Clarigen Technologies. After 7 years of him taking the bows for my work, it was time for the world to know the truth. 6. All corporate benefits previously extended to him are hereby terminated. The private jet access, the unlimited corporate credit cards, the executive assistant, the company car. His entire cushy lifestyle, funded by my algorithms, was officially over. And the 7th and final term, my personal favorite, a comprehensive, ironclad non-disclosure agreement. For a period of 5 years, he was forbidden from writing a memoir, giving a media interview, appearing on a podcast, or making any form of public commentary regarding his former role or relationship with the company. 5 years of silence. The man who had built his entire career on talking about work he didn't do was about to have absolutely nothing to say. It was harsh. It was career-ending. It was, without a doubt, the most ruthless thing I had ever done. But it was all completely, beautifully legal. He had 23 hours and counting to sign his life away. Time to see if he was better at math than he was at being a husband. I expected the knock around 10 p.m. That's about the time the third bottle of wine would have kicked in, when the bravado had dissolved into pure, liquid panic. He waited until 11:30. The pounding on my front door wasn't the polite knock of a visitor. It was the frantic, desperate hammering of a man who has just realized his entire world is a house of cards and a hurricane is blowing through. I took my time getting to the door, savoring the small, petty act of making him wait. For 7 years, he'd held all the social power, the public recognition. He'd made me feel like a supporting character in the story of my own life. Tonight, the tables had finally turned, and I was going to enjoy every single second of watching him realize it. When I opened the door, the sight of him was almost pathetic. He looked like he'd been hit by a tornado made entirely of consequences. His perfectly styled hair was a disheveled mess, his expensive suit was wrinkled and stained with something that looked suspiciously like red wine. His face, usually tanned and confident, was pale and streaked with tears. But it was his eyes that told the real story. The arrogant, self-assured gleam was gone, replaced by the wild, desperate look of a cornered animal. This was a man who had spent the last 12 hours calling lawyers, accountants, and anyone else who would take his call, only to be told the same thing over and over: he was trapped. "Please, Rosalind," he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken. "You can't destroy us like this." Us? The word felt foreign and absurd in my mouth. There is no us anymore, Sterling. You and Delia made that perfectly, publicly clear last night. I stepped aside and let him in, a silent, cold gesture. I wanted him to see it all one last time. This penthouse, this life of obscene luxury, purchased with money I had earned writing code in a dark room while he was out building relationships at charity lunches and five-star hotels. He stumbled into the living room and collapsed onto the Italian leather sofa he'd picked out. "You can't be serious about these terms," he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. $357 million? Rosalind, that's impossible. It's insane. Nobody has that kind of money. I walked to the bar, poured myself a scotch, my second of the night, and sat in the armchair across from him, a safe distance away. "You spent $357 million of my company's money, Sterling. The math isn't that complicated. I have the receipts." "Our money," he corrected automatically, a pathetic echo of his old entitlement. "The company's money. It was for business expenses. Networking. Building the brand. Is that what we're calling your affair with my stepsister now? A business expense? Was the diamond ring a line item I missed?" His face crumpled like a piece of paper. The ugly, racking sobs started then, the kind that happen when a man finally realizes he has made a mistake so monumental, so catastrophic, that there is no way to fix it, no way to take it back. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he stammered between sobs. "Delia and I, we just connected. at that conference in Miami. She made me feel seen. Powerful. Like I was more than just your husband, the guy in the background. You are more than just my husband, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, cutting through his self-pity. You were my business partner. My co-founder. The person I trusted with half of my life's work. And you threw it all away for what? A woman who orchestrated your marriage proposal as a public humiliation stunt. Real romantic, Sterling. Real classy. It was Delia's idea, he cried out, the words tumbling from his mouth in a desperate rush, as if confessing would somehow absolve him. The whole thing. She said it would be fun. A way to shake things up, to make you realize how much you needed me. She said you'd fight for me, that you'd make a scene, and it would prove how much you cared. She planned it all. I just stared at him, my face a mask of stone. So this was all some kind of sick, twisted test? You destroyed our marriage, my reputation, in front of 400 people, just to see if I'd put on a show for your entertainment? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Sterling, I cut him off, leaning forward, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. You and Delia turned my life into a piece of performance art. You were the stars, and I was the fool. Except you forgot one tiny, crucial detail. The fool you were performing for actually owned the theater, the production company, and the script. You erased me with my own money. You used my work to build a platform for your own ego, and then you used that platform to try and publicly execute me. This isn't a mistake, Sterling. It's a strategy. And I play strategy better than anyone you have ever met. He looked around the room then, his eyes darting from the expensive art to the sweeping views, as if he was seeing it all for the last time. Which, of course, he was. The terms are unreasonable, he whispered, his voice small and defeated. The money, the public statement, the non-disclosure, you're trying to destroy my entire future. No, I said, standing up, signaling that this conversation was over. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure that for the first time in your life, your future is based entirely on your own work instead of mine. A novel concept, I know. He looked up at me then, a last, desperate flicker of something cunning returning to his eyes. You recorded the proposal, didn't you? I saw your friend with her phone out. That video, if it gets out, it would destroy Delia, too. Her investors, her board, they'd crucify her for the publicity. You could use it as leverage. You could force her to help me pay the settlement. I pulled out my phone. I had, in fact, had a friend in the crowd record the whole thing. I found the file in my gallery. I played a few seconds of it, the ugly laughter, his cruel, amplified words, Delia's triumphant, vicious smile. The whole sordid scene in perfect, high-definition clarity. Then, as he watched, his eyes wide with a strange, sick hope, my thumb moved deliberately over the screen. I pressed the delete button. A small confirmation window popped up. Delete this video? This action cannot be undone. I pressed delete. Then, for good measure, I went into my cloud backup and permanently deleted it from there as well. What are you doing? He gasped, actually lunging forward on the couch as if he could somehow reach into the phone and save the file. That was your leverage. Your proof. I don't need leverage, I told him, my voice flat and final as I put the phone back in my pocket. I have something better. I have ownership papers. I have patent filings. I have bank records. I have 7 years' worth of documentation that proves exactly who built this company and who just pretended to run it. Delia is a symptom, Sterling, not the disease. She saw an opportunity and she took it. You are the one who betrayed 7 years of partnership. You are the one who spent my money. You are the one who will sign those papers. He crumpled then. Truly and completely crumbled, his shoulders shaking with the kind of deep, gut-wrenching sobs that come from the absolute bottom of a person's soul, from the place where they keep their worst mistakes and their biggest regrets. "I'll sign," he whispered through his tears, the fight completely gone from him. "I'll sign your damn papers." "But you're destroying me, Rosalind. You know that, right? My entire life is over." "No," I said, walking to the door and holding it open for him. "I'm just making sure your life finally reflects your actual contributions to our partnership. You have until noon tomorrow. After that, the terms get significantly worse." He walked past me like a ghost, a hollowed-out shell of the man I had once, inexplicably, loved. At the door, he turned back one last time, his face a mess of tears and desperation, looking for any sign of weakness, any crack in my resolve. "This isn't you, Rosie," he said, his voice a pathetic plea. "This cold, calculated revenge, it's not who you are." "You're right," I told him, my hand steady on the doorknob. "It isn't who I was." And I closed the door in his face. CTA. If you're still listening, could you do me a favor and like this video, and comment the number 1 below? That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1, and let me continue my story. A brief pause, allowing the emotional weight of the moment to settle, then the story resumes with a calmer, more business-like tone. The next morning, I dressed for war. A navy blue Tom Ford powersuit that cost a small fortune but made me feel like I was wearing armor. Italian leather heels that were stylish but sensible enough to stand my ground in. And the diamond earrings Sterling had bought me for our 5th anniversary. A final, silent fuck you. Before heading to the office, I had a brief, 10-minute call with my lawyer, a shark named Marcus who had been my legal counsel for years. "Everything is in place, Rosalind," he said, his voice a low growl. "The documents are ironclad. He has no wiggle room. It's over." The confirmation was a balm to my nerves. The glass-walled boardroom on the 43rd floor felt like a fish tank full of very nervous, very expensive fish. The 12 board members, men and women I had known for years, sat around a massive obsidian conference table, each one studiously avoiding eye contact with everyone else. Our CFO, Janet Morrison, was shuffling papers with a frantic energy, her pen clicking like a metronome counting down to an execution. Sterling sat at the far end of the table, as far away from me as the room's geometry would allow. He looked pale and hollow-eyed, like he had aged 10 years in the past 48 hours. In front of him, placed squarely in the center of his placemat, was the manila envelope. Signed. He had beaten my noon deadline by exactly 17 minutes, a final, pathetic act of compliance. I walked to my rightful seat at the head of the table. The soft, authoritative click of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the tense, suffocating silence. I sat down, placed my own copy of the signed agreement on the table, and calmly surveyed the room. "Good morning," I said, my voice clear and steady, betraying none of the turmoil of the past 2 days. "Thank you all for being here on such short notice. As of this morning, there have been some significant changes to Clarigen's executive structure." I let that hang in the air for a moment, enjoying the flicker of fear and confusion in their eyes. Effective immediately, Sterling Monroe has resigned from his position as Chief Executive Officer. You could have heard a stock price drop. Janet's pen stopped clicking mid-click, frozen in the air. Arthur Hemlock, our oldest board member, a man who had been a mentor to me in the early days, looked like he was having a heart attack. Additionally, I continued, my voice as cold and sharp as a scalpel, I will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer, as well as the newly created position of Financial Oversight Director, with comprehensive veto authority over all corporate expenditures. Furthermore, as of this morning, Delia Pierce has been terminated from her position and is permanently banned from any and all involvement with this company or its subsidiaries. Now Sterling looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair, maybe tunnel straight down through the floor and emerge somewhere in New Jersey. But he had one last part to play in this tragedy he had co-authored. He stood up slowly, clutching a single piece of paper in his trembling hands. This was part of the agreement. The public confession. I need to make a statement, he began, his voice cracking. He didn't look at me. He looked at the far wall, at a point just above Arthur's head. I want to acknowledge, he read, his voice a monotone, that Rosalind Evans is the founder, primary architect, and 90% majority stakeholder of Clarigen Technologies. She personally developed our core algorithms, filed all 23 of our foundational patents, and made the strategic decisions that built this company into what it is today. The board members were now looking back and forth between us, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. This wasn't just a resignation. This was a complete and total abdication. A corporate confession of the highest order. I was the public face of the company, Sterling continued, each word seeming to cost him something essential. But Rosalind was always the actual leader. The business model that generates our revenue, all of that came from her work, her vision, her funding. He took a shaky breath. I take full responsibility for misrepresenting my role in the company's success, and I apologize to the board, to our investors, and to Rosalind for any confusion my actions may have caused. He sat down abruptly, the performance finally over. The room fell back into that thick, heavy silence. I stood up and walked to the large whiteboard at the front of the room. I didn't need to do this. The papers were signed. But they needed to see it, to understand the scale of the fraud they had been party to. I picked up a black marker and wrote 4 simple lines. Revenue generated by our Evans patents, 7 years $847 million. Corporate expenses authorized and spent by Est Monroe, 7 years $357 million. Key business decisions made solely by Est Monroe, 0. Lines of code written by Est Monroe, 0. These numbers, I said, turning back to face a room full of people who were finally understanding the truth they had overlooked for years, are the foundation and the reality of this company. Sterling has been an excellent spokesperson. But he has never been the CEO. As of right now, I am lifting the emergency financial freeze. All legitimate business operations will resume immediately. All frivolous expenditures will be terminated, pending a full audit. Are there any questions? There were none. The coup was complete. My victory was absolute. But as I stood there, looking out at the city from my new position at the head of the table, it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt necessary. 6 months later, my life was a different world. A different universe, really. The first thing I did was sell the penthouse. All that cold marble and glass felt like a mausoleum to a life I no longer wanted and a woman I no longer was. I moved to a smaller, sunlit apartment on the Upper West Side. It had a cozy fireplace, overflowing bookshelves, and windows that actually opened to let in the fresh air. My neighbors were professors, artists, and doctors, people who worked real jobs for honest paychecks. No one cared that I had built a multi-million-dollar company. They cared that I held the elevator and didn't play my music too loud after 10 p.m. It was wonderfully, blessedly normal. After the story broke, Forbes ran a feature article on me, calling me the silent genius behind Clarigen's success. That article led to an unexpected offer from Columbia University to be a guest lecturer at their business school. 3 days a week, I stood in front of a room full of bright, hungry graduate students who actually wanted to learn, not just network their way to startup funding. It felt like I was contributing to something meaningful again, not just generating revenue for lifestyle expenses. I also started investing again, but differently. I created a small venture capital fund specifically for startups founded by women in tech. That's how I met Leah Chen. She was a brilliant 26-year-old with a PhD from MIT who had developed a revolutionary new form of AI. Her pitch was raw, her technology was groundbreaking, and her passion was infectious. The old board would have never funded her. I wrote her a check for $20 million on the spot. It was the best and easiest business decision I ever made. We weren't just building a company, we were building a new legacy. A letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday in October. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. It was from Sterling. He had moved back to his hometown in Ohio, a place he had always sworn he would never return to. He was working at a local community college, managing their IT department. A job with a modest salary and no perks. He wrote that Delia had left him the day the divorce was finalized and his access to the last of his funds was cut off. She told him he was no longer a growth asset. He said he was taking classes at night, learning to code. He said he was finally learning the difference between being important and being useful. You tried to teach me that for years, the last line read. I'm sorry it took losing everything to finally understand what you meant. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box where I keep things from my past. Not forgotten, but finished. The war was over. And to my own surprise, the quiet peace that followed felt infinitely better than the thrill of victory ever could. My life was my own now, every part of it. Measured not in stock prices or square footage, but in genuine accomplishments and quiet, everyday joys. Some victories don't need an audience. Some wins are worth more than applause. They're quiet. They're personal. And they are, finally, peaceful. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share all of that, but I felt it was important. If you've ever been through a betrayal, big or small, or felt like your contributions were invisible, please know that you are not alone, and your strength is always greater than your pain. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please feel free to share them in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, a like and a subscribe to the channel would mean the world to me. It lets me know that we're building a community here. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll talk to you again soon.